As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact. As a finance professional in a disrupted business landscape, what does it take to be in demand? What does it take to attract great paying international roles? If you're an ICAN member, it'll just take one exam. That's all it takes to complete the globally recognized SEMA professional qualification and the internationally respected CGMA designation. As a SEMA member and a CGMA designation holder, employers will look at you as a finance professional, constantly acquiring new skills to add value to the business. That's why they'll be willing to pay premium to hire and retain you. If you have 5 years of relevant experience and are an ICAN member, you can directly sit for the final exam of the SEMA Professional Qualification, the Strategic Case Study exam. Start studying the SEMA Professional Qualification. Prepare to make an impact.
Good evening, our professional colleagues, friends and students of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. It is my pleasure to welcome you to another episode of ICAN on AIR, your program, our program, powered by the Noble Institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. I'm your host for today, Tosin Akinwumi, FCA. And like I mentioned, this is the last episode in the month of April 2023. Kindly get across your colleagues and friends that we have commenced and we have started this edition. And you can be part of this show on ICAN Facebook page, on ICAN Instagram handle, and also ICAN YouTube channel. And today, 27th April, we are considering the contemporary topic, the ease of doing business in Nigeria, a review of the Business Facilitation Act 2022. And I have here with me an eminent tax practitioner, a vibrant speaker, Mr. Kenneth Erukume, FCA, who shall be providing insight on the chosen topic. Kenneth Erukume, FCA, is a partner, tax reporting and strategy leader, West Africa at PwC. He leads the firm's tax reporting and strategy in the West Market area. Soon after his undergraduate degree in applied sciences from the University of Benin, Kenneth joined PwC in 2004 and has been with the firm for over 18 years. During this period, he's been known for his expertise in tax compliance, tax advisory, audit and strategic tax consultancy services for clients across Africa. Kenneth spent 18 months as an international tax manager at PwC South Africa in Johannesburg, where he was one of the pioneer members for PwC's Africa desk, advising clients seeking to invest in Africa and assisting them with managing their tax and regulatory risks across different jurisdictions. Kenneth is a fellow of ICAN and CITN, as well as a member of the Association of Corporate Treasurers. Ladies and gentlemen, and that is the profile of our guest on the show today. But before I bring him in, we need to go and run some commercials. And like we usually mention on this program affords professionals and business owners the opportunity to showcase their goods and services at affordable rates. The reach of this program is global, and I assure you, you won't regret your patronage with the Institute. So sit back and relax, and I'll be right back with my guest after this time out. Stay tuned. Welcome back, our dear viewers, to our lovely program, ICAN on AIR. And we have our guest in the house, Mr. Kenneth Erukume, FCA. Mr. Kenneth, you are welcome to ICAN on AIR.
Thank you very much, Tosin, and happy to be here and to engage with you as well as the attendees.
It's a pleasure having you around. And I also want to welcome our viewers across the length and breadth of the country, including those in diaspora who are ready to connect with us. And like I did say, we are considering the topic for today, ease of doing business in Nigeria, a review of the Business Facilitation Act 2022. And let me provide this background to our discourse, Mr. Kenneth. President Muhammadu Buhari in February 2023 signed the Business Facilitation Bill into law, thus betting the Business Facilitation Act of 2022, the first of its kind, which became effective in February 2023. And the objective of this act, as stated, is to eliminate impediments to the ease of doing business, to entrench transparency, efficiency, and productivity in the country via the amendment of certain provisions of relevant extant acts. So, having this background, and also economic growth is somewhat related to the ease of doing business in the nation sectors. Having you today as our guest, our global viewers would want you to share your wealth of experience with them. So, Mr. Kenneth, what exactly is business and what is business survival?
All right, thank you very much, Tosin. So, business is essentially an organization that has been set up to engage in commercial, industrial, or other activities with the aim of generating profit or meeting the needs of customers. So we have different types of business, either engaged in services or manufacturing, or even this, trading in terms of, selling goods. So business is quite important because in the context of economic development, how businesses thrive dictates the quality of life of the people who are in that environment, and also drives how much the government can collect in terms of taxes. So without economic activity, you pretty much do not have a society. Business survival, or survivability, as you've put it, refers to how, when the business has been set up, it's able to continue to thrive within an environment. So it's able to continue to operate, able to generate revenue, not just for the short term, but medium term and sustainably into the future. Businesses survive based on careful planning, effective management, and the ability to adapt to changing market conditions. In the recent global CEO survey that PwC conducted, one of the major concerns of CEOs across the world was around a time frame of 10 years, whether their businesses will continue to thrive with the massive disruption we're seeing in the technology space and in businesses generally. So it's an area of major concern for the C-suite. So it is important for companies to have sound business strategy that are resilient, competent, and innovative, motivated workforce, and sufficient financial resources, in terms of a balance sheet that can cope. And of course, innovation in this day and age, every business needs to have it. We're seeing some of the things that are happening around generative AI and what that could do in terms of things like, statutory preparation, statutory financial statements preparation, or even providing tax compliance service, or even tax advisory. With that advanced technology, if you're able to find, sufficient data bank for that AI to extract information, it may be able to begin to do some of the professional services that humans are doing today. Now, if that happens, your traditional way of doing business will be under threat.
Okay.
But that is around technology, sitting back around the business environment generally. businesses thrive within an environment. The environment is like the habitat. So if you take a fish out of water, it's going to have a problem. So the business environment and how conducive it is also quite important for businesses to thrive.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that summary that you gave at the end actually speaks to it all. That business survival or survivability has to do with business thriving and doing all those factors you have mentioned in the response. Yes, we are still laying foundation to where we are actually going. And my next question for you now will be that kindly run us through the different types of businesses that we have out there, considering their ownership, sizes, and structures, and their relationships to the revenue growth of individuals, corporate bodies, and the nations as a whole.
Very much. So, the business, like I mentioned, has to operate within an environment, and that environment has risks. Those risks could be strategic risks, operational risks, reputational risk, and all sorts of risk. So when you're looking at the risk profile of the environment, as well as the risk profile of the type of business, that could dictate the sort of corporate entity that you use to engage that business. And when I say corporate entity, sometimes the business could be the same with the owners. Sometimes the business could be separate from the owners. So in Nigeria, we've been able to provide different frameworks or vehicles for businesses to be undertaking. One of them is the sole proprietorship, which is owned and operated by a single individual who's not different from the business. Now, that individual could register a business name if the business is, if he wants to give a trading name that's separate from him or her. But if the name of that business is exactly the same as him or her, he doesn't really need to register a business name. The person can just operate. So Kenneth Erikume Ventures, can pretty much operate on its own. But the risk about that is that with a sole proprietorship is that the owner of the business is not separate from the business. So if there is any liability that comes up on the business in terms of debts, in terms of legal issues, you take it up with me directly. So it's not really appropriate for a high risk type of business or a business that requires regulatory approval. But the tax rate for that is not really bad because it can't be more than 18.96% because it's the personal income tax rate. Then, you can do the business through a partnership. And as accountants, we are all quite familiar with partnerships, which is a business that's operated by two or more people in partnership. And they are jointly and severally liable, right? So if there is an exposure in terms of the business by one partner, all the partners are jointly and severally liable. And statutorily, this sort of vehicle is used for businesses that are that will want some exposure to the business. So for auditors and for legal practitioners, they have to compulsorily use a partnership to undertake their business. But apart from that, if you want the business to be transparent from a tax perspective, which means that you're not assessing the vehicle itself, but you're assessing the investors who are the partners, then this is an interesting vehicle to also use. Then the CAMA 2020 introduced the limited liability partnership, which is a mix of a company, a corporate entity, and a partnership. With the limited liability partnership, all the attributes of a partnership exists, but the partners are limited in terms of their liability. So if there is an issue with the LLP, you cannot take on the exposure to the partners. But many people are not yet using this vehicle just because it also has some uncertainty around the tax treatment. Because from the perspective of the law, it considers it to be a body corporate. And if you take that position and interpose it with the Companies Income Tax Act, it may mean that the limited liability partnership will be subject to tax as a company, right? Separate from the partners. So that sort of outcome is not what many people would really like. And then you have the limited liability company, which is, like a high risk vehicle, for regulated businesses. So if you're operating, for example, a transport business for a school, as an example, because of the risks that could happen with that sort of business, maybe there's an accident or there could be, kidnapping, it presupposes that, it doesn't make sense to use a sole proprietorship. You may want to use a limited liability company. Or if you're going to get something from a regulator, a limited liability company, or you're doing a very robust proposal or building a road, that's the sort of vehicle that is used. And then you have, the cooperatives, if, for example, the employees of a company want to come together to make investments, buy a property and get returns from there, you could set up a cooperative society. And then you have the not-for-profits. So there are schools of thought that believe not-for-profits or NGOs are not really businesses. But in recent times, their involvement in social issues and in promoting well-being of society, people consider them to also be interesting vehicles or interesting business, components of a society. And those can be set up as a limited by guarantee or incorporated trustees.
Okay.
So depending on the type of business, the complexity, the risk, you may want to think of the type of vehicle. But I think one of the most important things is the environment in which that business is operating. How conducive is that environment? What are the incentives? And is there fairness? Is there, are bottlenecks there that can be removed? And I think that is what the government needs to look at a bit more.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Kenneth. How else would our guests know that we have actually brought a coach and a teacher here today? Because your response to that question is actually clarifies the various businesses we have in Nigeria today. So let's gradually move into the mainstream of the topic for today. So what does ease of doing business actually mean? And what is Nigeria's current ease of doing business index and its implication relative to other nations?
Right. Thank you very much for that question. So you see, I was moving gradually towards the environment, right? What is the habitat like for the businesses? Because that would, determine whether, the businesses can thrive or they will not. It's like taking, a fish and saying, well, all fish will survive on water. But you take a fish that is supposed to thrive in fresh water and you take it into the sea, there will be problems. So ease of doing business simply means, the level of ease or difficulty involved in starting, running, and sustaining any business. So those are the environmental indicators within an economy that you would look at and ask yourself, is it conducive? So the World Bank historically used to do some surveys, which used to measure some indicators. And those, for me, are benchmarks that you can use to test whether, the environment is conducive. For example, they look at, the ease of obtaining permits, the ease of registering a property, the ease of getting credit, the ease of paying taxes, and how easy it is to enforce contracts and resolving insolvency, amongst other criteria. Now, you would agree with me that one of the most important things, and all these indicators are quite important, but you see, each of them has a contribution they have to ease of doing business. So taking property registration as an example, in even Lagos State, one of my partners has actually paid for a property before, and ended up paying for the property twice, because after paying for the property, even though there was the name was in the registry, he discovered subsequently that there was a court case on that property, and the final judgment was given against the person whose name was registered in the registry. So effectively, he had to go and negotiate with the people who won the judgment to re-register. In some countries, that can never happen, right? So just to give you context of why these indicators are important. So the World Bank used to encourage different countries to continue to promote ease of doing business. They used to carry out surveys around some of these parameters to check the health of the country against those parameters. And Nigeria used to rank 131 out of 190 economies. And we had a score of 52.4%. So 52.4 out of 100. Of course, that's not good enough, but we had moved significantly. I think, about 5 years before then, we were about 180 something out of 189 countries. So we were closer to the bottom. But, there were some, reforms that were carried out by the Presidential Enabling Business and Environment Council that ensured that we moved slowly upwards, right? The World Bank has stopped this survey, by the way, right? Due to some controversies. One or two countries, there were questions around whether it was not just packaging, that those countries had devoted some time into employing lobbyists and so on to promote reforms that were not actually yielding fruit at the grassroots and out there on the street. So they've discontinued this survey, but in terms of where we are as a country, as at the last time, we were 131 out of 190, which means that Nigeria is actually not a very easy place to do business. A low index, if you're not profiling well on ease of doing business, it can impact on investment, it can impact on business growth, it can limit job creation, it can reduce tax revenue. In fact, there is a direct correlation of poor performance in ease of doing business and tax collection. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. For those who are just joining us on this program, you are on to ICAN on Air, your program, our program. And today we are reviewing the topic, ease of doing business in Nigeria, a review of the Business Facilitation Act 2022. And here with me in the studio is our guest, Mr. Kenneth Erikume, FCA, and he has been dissecting those questions since the start of this program today. Because we don't have much time, Mr. Kenneth, so I want you to take those responses very short so that we can take as much questions as we could take on the topic today. So moving forward, it has been opined that Nigeria is suffering from business climate hostilities. And I think you have also mentioned some of them in the course of your responses to other questions. And that there is no ease in the ease of doing business in Nigeria. What's your opinion as a professional?
Right. So we obviously rank very low, among the scales in those parameters I mentioned. And this I will just expose to you directly. Registering property is not the easiest. Getting electricity, a lot of us, we generate our own power. Enforcing contracts in Nigeria is quite difficult. And apart from those parameters, which are just like formal parameters, we also have issues around corruption. Our corruption index, we rank high in terms of, corruption, which is not a good thing. We also have, significant infrastructure deficit. So we don't have good roads. We don't have rail, So if you want to move something from the north down to the south, you have to go by road, and that's not great. The rail system doesn't work. And then even our ports, are congested, and, just the, simple look at Apapa will tell you how difficult it is. And those things actually cost business a lot of money. So, and it increases our cost. So while, the dollar, the price of the dollar has been gaining against the naira, which means naira is becoming weaker and weaker, the cost of doing business in Nigeria continues to remain high, because all of these things you have to pay to deal with them. And, the insecurity issue also makes it quite difficult as well. So overall, it's important for Nigeria to continue to prioritize reforms, not just in those formal parameters I've mentioned, but also in these corruption, insecurity, infrastructure, and so on.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think you actually did justice to that topic. Also, in February this year, the Business Facilitation Act was signed into law by the President of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, thereby amending some business-related laws. Kindly run us through some of the amendments and how you think they will impact the ease of doing business in Nigeria.
All right, thank you very much. So there were a lot of amendments. So some of the amendments related to some things that had been done when the Buhari administration first came in, the Executive Order 001, which have now been codified. So for example, it's now a law, before it was previously an executive order, that within 21 days from the commencement of the act, all MDAs are to provide a complete list of requirements and their timelines and fees for their products, services, and approval on their website and customer help desk. The MDAs have also been mandated to have a service level agreement that should provide information contained in the list, as well as a summary of the application procedure, how people can have redress in relation to their applications and other requirements. Apart from that, they've also, the law also introduces or formalizes electronic processes for transactions with the Corporate Affairs Commission. So that is also a very important one. Even though I think, the current CAC process has improved significantly, businesses still have one or two things which I believe can improve, which I think the Business Facilitation Act also contributes to. The act also modifies some other acts. For example, the Customs and Excise Management Act. It also amends the Export Prohibition Act. It empowers the Minister of Finance with the power to vary the prohibition, the prohibited goods list. It also amends the Industrial Inspectorate Act by ensuring that the threshold to give notice of intention to incur capital expenditure, which is, the CAFA, is increased from 20,000 naira to 5 million naira for each asset. In practice, it used to actually be 500,000, but now it's now said, okay, if your asset is, the particular asset you're investing in is 5 million above, that's when you get that certificate of acceptance for fixed assets. It also modifies the National Housing Fund Act by saying that it is only those that meet the minimum wage. Previously, it was 3,000 naira that are required to contribute 2.5% of their monthly income to the fund. An interesting thing that you would notice in the act, if you're very observant, is that for the private sector employees, it doesn't make it mandatory. It actually uses the word may, that the private sector employees may contribute to the NHFR. And if you would remember, there's been a lot of conversations and controversies around this, so much so that NECA at some point, organized employers across the country to say, you do not need to contribute to this. And why was that the case? Many employees contributed into the fund, but were not able to access the mortgage loans, right? In which case it is counterproductive and almost like a tax. So now for the private sector employees, it becomes, optional. And then for the National Office of Technology Acquisition and Promotion Act, within the first 2 years of operation by a company, they've removed, the late registration penalties, which actually gives some respite to those businesses, if they do not get they do not apply within the first 2 years. So there are many amendments to different acts and the business landscape. But the issue is that, we had an executive order before. And when that executive order, and sorry, I forgot the one around removal of touting within the Nigerian ports and ensuring that, if you get to the port, you only interface with one agency, right? And, if you're traveling back into Nigeria, you remember, you submit your passport almost to 3 or 4 different places. So the act actually says it has to be one person, and then all the other MDAs can get their information on the back end. So you remember when the Executive Order 001 came out, there was a lot of impact within the first few months. And our airports became free of touts. Our ports, became free of touts. But within a very few months, everything was reversed. So it's not a question of having the law. Well, the law gives it more weight than an executive order. But I think it is actually the will to implement some of these reforms and drive it, for want of a better word, to the street that matters, to ensure that people actually feel the effect of these reforms. Otherwise, it would amount to packaging and just, something that it looks like something that is good to have, as against it actually having a really impact. What we would like to see is, value being extracted from all these reforms. Exactly. And businesses coming back to say government has done their job.
Exactly. Thank you very much for listing all those amendments to those acts, which the BFA has actually come to make amendments to. I'm sure our students are also listening with rapt attention, and they're taking notes of all these amendments. Once again, viewers at home, you are onto the program ICAN on Air, and we are considering this topic today, ease of doing business in Nigeria, a review of the Business Facilitation Act 2022. Let's quickly go and pay some bills now. When we come back, we'll continue with further questions that people have sent in. Keep on sending in your questions. Certainly, we'll take them before the end of the program. Stay tuned and don't go away. Welcome back. We are still here with Mr. Kenneth Irikume, FCA, who has been answering questions regarding ease of doing business in Nigeria, particularly in reference to the BFA 2022. Let me quickly recognize our members and friends who have joined us on the different platforms. Joy Akintayo, Ibukunluwa Sheun, Ayodeji, we cite you. Fagbola Temitope Adeni, a regular person who joins this program. Patrick Akamioko from Lagos. Joy Akintayo, Olugbenga Kinlalu, Ismail Sulaiman, we cite you. Rahim Mumin Abolore Desmond, we cite you. Bawa Rashidi, all the way from Benin Kebbi in Kebbi State, we recognize you. Keep on sending your questions as we have our guest in the house, and he will be doing justice to the topic. Now, let's continue with our question, Mr. Kenneth. Does ease of doing business necessarily has to do with promulgation of laws or provision of infrastructural facilities such as good roads, stable power, and security, as you have earlier mentioned? What's your thoughts on these?
Yeah, so ease of doing business is a combination of all these factors. The easiest and lowest hanging fruit for government really is, changing the law, right? The other transformational aspects are more complicated. So I don't think it is wrong for government to start with amending the law, because there are things that they can quickly just deal with. For example, if you want to clear the port, right, of touts, if you want to ensure that, although it's, some of this is within the purview of the state government because the land is vested in the state, except it is a federal government property, you can easily amend it by law. So I think that what the government has done is like the baby step in terms of ease of doing business. But the more transformational aspects of ease of doing business is what you've highlighted. Ensuring, and road is, I would say step 2. When you begin to look at proper infrastructure, that would drive and promote commerce, you must start talking about, the seaports, the airports, and you must talk about railway, right? Because rail is perhaps one of the most secure forms of transportation, and you can actually move things in bulk from one location to another. And where we are is where we have redundant infrastructure around railway. One of my partners put up the financials of the Nigerian Railway, the Nigerian Railway Commission, and they were doing 110 billion in terms of losses, 110 billion naira. What does that tell you? That we have an agency that is being funded, but there, is not providing value. So we need to tackle things like that. So of course, some of these things, to tackle it, you need to bring in the private sector. It is clear to us that managing some of these infrastructure doesn't really work in the hands of government. So we started with NEPA. Once it went into the hands of the telcos, the GSM companies, we began to perform optimally, right? So government needs to look at privatizing some of these assets, because some of these assets are actually losing us money, right? And we are not getting value out of those assets. So we need to move them, either into PPPs or directly into the private sector, so that we can get value and we then pay commercially for those products. But like you said, it has to be transformational. We need to look at infrastructure. We need to look at, electricity, roads, rail. And we also need to look at the services that are being provided by the MDAs. This includes the regulators. So I spoke about Nigerian Railway Corporation, but that's a service. Now let's talk about, regulators, right? The regulators should actually be promoting and making it easier for the private sector to thrive. So instances where withholding tax is deducted from my income and I struggle for 2 years to collect the credit note or to even get a refund, that is an inhibition to ease of doing business. So we need to just unbundle things and ensure the countries that rank highly are countries where the public sector provides value to the citizens.
All right, all right, all right. I think your last comment actually provided more insights into another question I also have here in terms of the taxation aspect of it. Now, let's go to this way. Small and medium-sized enterprises, the SMEs, it's a known fact that they represent a huge percentage of businesses in Nigeria. So my question is, to what extent are they covered or protected by this Business Facilitation Act of 2022? To what extent are the SMEs covered or protected with this issue?
All right. So the Business Facilitation Act, in terms of the reforms that it's promoting, I don't think it is really targeted at SMEs per se, right? What it's trying to do is to promote a conducive environment for everyone. In terms of recognition of SMEs and the role they play, I think it recognizes it. And some of the reduction in regulatory burden, at the ports, streamlining of processes, for example, at the CAC, promotion of investment, all those things would impact on SMEs. Another key provision that could impact on SMEs is the establishment of a one-stop shop for business registration and licensing, which will make it easier and faster for SMEs to start and operate a business. Because you need that agility and flexibility to start your business as a startup and to begin to operate quickly with all your licenses. That one-stop shop is supposed to provide a broad range of support services, including business advisory services, training, and access to finance to help, SMEs to grow and thrive. The reform I mentioned, where the regulators, the big companies already have the manpower and the functions to actually know all the rules and regulations that operate in Nigeria. But one of the things that would help the SMEs is that publication, when the regulatory agencies publish their regulatory requirements, and their procedures are evident on the website. This will it will also help to prevent, arbitrary and inconsistent application of regulations, which is one of the, concerns of small and medium enterprises. The economic environment is already not in their favor. It doesn't really work well when regulation also places heavy burden on them. It will also reduce the opportunity for corruption, because you wouldn't have those instances where someone will come up and say, no, you cannot get your TCC, you have to pay someone to collect it, or you cannot get your NAFDAC license, you have to grease the palms of someone. So all that graft and corruption will be reduced significantly. So I think for SMEs is more around allowing them to have that equity. Atedo Peterside said something in one forum, and this was very much publicized online, when he was talking to Dangote, and he said that some of us, the reason why we are able to thrive is we have that natural aggression and we're able to drive our own agenda. These SMEs don't have that clout, to push their case. So you must make it very transparent and easy for them, to deal with regulators and get their licenses and so on. So to that extent, I think the Business Facilitation Act, supports them and makes it more equitable. But at the end of the day, It's around implementation.
Exactly, exactly. And that takes me to my next question, because having regulation is one thing, and implementing those regulations are different things entirely. So, Mr. Kenneth, Nigeria is about to have new leaders in our political and governance structure very soon. And assuming some of them are watching this program, what would be your advice or suggestion to them on the implementation of the Business Facilitation Act of 2022 for Nigeria's growth and development?
Right. So I mean, I'm hoping they listen, right? Um, I think, like I said, this thing has come up before, almost 8 years ago, or more than eight, sorry, about 8 years ago, less than 8 years ago, where there was an executive order 001. And effectively all the things they tried to institute, were reversed. So it is important that some of these issues that we are, the law was trying to address are actually addressed, right? And this would require, apart from codifying the law, ensuring that the tone is set at the top, and there should be zero tolerance for contravention of the law. So if we say we want to stop touting at the ports, right? And this is the law, we need to hold people accountable if they do not comply. So it is really unfair, and apart from that, I also mentioned the importance of ensuring that, MDAs actually provide value. It's really unfair that we travel to all these ports across the world. Your luggage comes out immediately. In Nigeria, you probably wait 1.5 hours because the carousel is not working. Yesterday, I was in Abuja airport, waiting. The air conditioning system in the full airport was not working, right? So we need to start asking questions about the quality of our public sector. How much value are they adding? Are they just consuming the generated tax funds? For example, what is the value of our refineries, right? So we have those refineries. There were some reports that they were costing hundreds of billions of naira, right? But in some years, they didn't even refine one drop of crude. So, public sector must be an enabler and not a killer of productivity and value. So we must discontinue some of these leakages and activities that do not add value. We must leverage our existing assets. If the government cannot utilize the assets to create value, then we must go into PPPs to ensure that we raise funding or we concession some of those assets. We must also reduce the pressure on taxpayers, right? So any opportunity we have with the Finance Act, we tend to see an opportunity to raise taxes. But our
Wow.
problem has never been, the taxes. It has always been that we have this big economy, with the biggest GDP in sub-Saharan Africa, but the tax component from that GDP is just 6%. So we need to focus more around expanding the tax net. We need to use data and technology to ease public sector services and also to enhance revenue.
Wow, wow, wow. These are valuable points regarding implementation of the Business Facilitation Act 2022. And like you also mentioned, that you hope they listen and they get all those points for necessary implementation for the growth and development of Nigeria as a country. We do not have much time again, Mr. Kenneth, but we still have lots of questions for you. And our viewers at home are also sending questions regarding this topic for today. But we need to wind down now on the program. You mentioned MDAs and technology. Just in 30 seconds, considering the relevance of technology in the world today, how can businesses and government MDAs adopt technology in implementing these acts that we are considering today and actually ensuring that costs and inefficiencies to businesses are reduced? Just in 30 seconds, sir.
Yeah, so I've dealt with a lot of government organizations in transformation. So this is not a very easy process, I must say. So when obviously you want to digitize the processes. When you digitize processes, you remove opportunity for graft, but you also improve efficiency. So something that, someone will carry with file and go a minute here and go a minute there, all of that can be cut out significantly, and you can block leakages, in that process. So it's important that you digitize the process, you automate processes, you introduce effective channels for electronic payments, and so on and so forth. And I can mention all of that, but one of the most important factors is actually the change management, because you can actually invest significant amounts of money, running into hundreds of billions into digitization.
Sure.
But if the people do not use it, you end up, at square one, right? The FRS has done a bit around Tax Pro Max, and kudos to them. That transformation process has worked well because they had effective change management, working with their officers on ground to ensure, that they're working with the automated and digitized processes, right? Even though we have teething problems and some challenges with Tax Pro Max, it should be said. But that change management is perhaps the most critical factor to get success with any digitalization and digitization transformation project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kenneth. Let me have your parting shot with this question. ICANN is always open to ideas that would positively advance the growth of our members, as we all know, the accountancy profession, and the Nigerian business environment at large. What is your advice to ICANN on contributions in national policy formulation in order to encourage business growth and economic development, especially in our country, Nigeria? In 30 seconds, sir.
Yeah, so one of the things you would notice is that government comes up with policies as they see it, and that is from their own perspective. And this will be driven by the pain they are feeling. So if it is FRS, it's all about revenue. If it is NAFDAC, it's all about, fake drugs and so on and so forth. Government rarely sees the business angle, the perspective of the businesses. So ICANN, as it's already doing, but can do more in ensuring that they bring the business perspective and bring the public sector perspective, into one, environment where there is a conversation before laws are codified. Otherwise, we'll continue to see instances where laws are just being implemented, executive bills become acts, but just from one side of the equation. So ICANN, I believe, because we have ICANN members on both sides of the divide, can bridge that gap and bring all stakeholders together to have a proper dialogue and conversation to formulate policies that enhance value for all stakeholders, not just from the government's angle. And that's my parting shot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kenneth Erikume, FCA, for your parting shot and for the valuable responses you have been able to avail to us on this program for today. We want to say thank you to you for coming on the show today and sharing your wealth of experience. On behalf of the producers of this program and editorial team and our viewers across the globe, we appreciate your time and effort. And we hope that when next we call on you, you will hack in on our call. Thank you very much, Mr. Kenneth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tosin, and thanks for having me. Thanks to the ICANN board and executives for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. Quickly, viewers at home, let me quickly run through some announcements here. Entrepreneurship Committee of ICANN presents a one-day physical seminar theme, Entrepreneur, the short pathways for future business owner. And we'll have topics setting up accounting practice, opportunities for chartered accountants in a digital economy, and export opportunities for chartered accountants. We have erudite resource persons on ground that will take us on these topics. The date is May 4th, 2023. Venue, Lagos Airport Hotel. Register with 7,500 naira. Also, our ICAN annual dinner is coming up on May 6th. Ensure you get your tickets for your family and friends. Accountants are just not to work and work. We are also meant to relax, wine and dine with our loved ones after a great work. Also, we have our MCD programs for the month of May. One coming up in the May 10 to 11, another one May 24 to 25th. All of these programs are hosted on ICAN website. Please go there and check the relevant information. Our beloved viewers at large, ICAN on Air now comes up every Thursday of the week between the hours of 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Nigerian time. We want to thank you for all being part of this show today. And that is the show for today. Till I come your way again with another guest and another topical issue. Please stay safe and sound. On behalf of the editorial team and our producers, I'm Tosin Akinomi, FCA, saying thank you for watching and bye for now.